5 and 6, me, Mr. A, back with story time for another day, and chapter 12 of Oversea Under Stone by Susan Cooper. So, chapter 12. It took Barney a long time to make his way down the hill past the house. There had been no sign of great Uncle Merry on the headland. On the road, knots of wandering people were scattered maddeningly about in his path, and 3 times he had to stand aside as a car came grinding up the steep, narrow slope. Barney dodged impatiently to and fro, in and out, with Rufus at his heels. Halfway down the hill he heard music from the other side of the harbour, and through the heads he caught sight of the dancing procession moving forward along the quay. Slipping his finger inside Rufus's collar, he sidestepped through the thickening crowd and down the hill as fast as he could, darting through every visible gap like a shrimp in a pool. But when he reached the corner of the harbour, the procession was upon him, and he could see nothing at all but an impenetrable wall of legs and backs. He wriggled through behind them, the din of the music thumping in his ears, until he was out of the crowd at last and on the quay. With a sigh of relief he let go of Rufus's collar and ran with him towards the deserted corner where he had arranged to meet Simon and Jane. And there was nobody there. Barney looked round wildly. He could see nothing to give him the slightest hint of where the others had gone. Reasoning with himself, he decided they must have caught sight of Mrs. Polk. She had been very keen on the idea of the carnival and the dancing. She must be in the procession. And it had been Simon's and Jane's job to go and find her, as it had been his to go and scout on the headland. They must have gone chasing her, knowing that he would guess where they had gone. Satisfied, Barney went off to find the carnival. He followed the last of the crowd still drifting up the road. Even down in the sheltered harbour the wind was blowing in from the sea, but now and again it dropped for a moment, and Barney heard a tantalising snatch of music come wafting over the roofs from somewhere in the village. Pum, pum, de-pum, pum, pum. All round him people were wandering aimlessly about, idly talking. Where have they gone? We can meet them at the ground, but they dance through the streets for ages yet. Oh, come on. Disregarding them, Barney set off down a little side turning, with Rufus still loping patiently at his heels. He wandered from one winding lane to another, down narrow passages where the slate roofs almost touched overhead, past neat front doors with their brass knockers gleaming golden in the sun, through the cobbled alleys where front doors opened not onto a pavement but straight onto the street. For a small place, Trewiswick seemed to be an extraordinarily endless maze. A maze of winding little roads. Straining his ears all the time, Barney followed the sound of the music through the maze. He made 1 or 2 false turns, losing the sound. Then gradually he heard the band grow louder, and with it he began to hear the hum of voices and the rasping shuffle of feet. He snapped his fingers to Rufus and broke into a trot, swinging from one quiet, deserted little alley into the next. And then suddenly the noise burst on him like a storm, and he was out of the muffling, narrow street and among the crowds. Out in the sunshine, filling a broad road where the procession jogged and danced by. "Come on, my white-headed boy," someone called to him, and the people nearby turned and laughed. Barney could not see Simon and Jane amongst the dancers, and there seemed little chance of being able to get to them even if he did. He gazed fascinated round him at the bobbing giant heads, the bodies beneath them fantastic and gay in doublets and red, yellow and blue hose. Everywhere he saw costumed figures, a man dancing stiff as a tree, a solid flapping mass of green leaves, pirates, sailors, a hussar in bright red with a tall cap, slave girls, jesters, a man in a long blue silk gown made up as a pantomime dame, a girl all in black, twirling, sinuous as a cat, with a cat's bewhiskered head, little boys in green as Robin Hood, little girls with fair long hair as Alice, highwaymen, morris men, flower sellers, gnomes. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. The dancers whirled in and out of the crowd on the edge of the street where he stood, and then suddenly, before Barney knew what was happening, they were dancing around him. He felt someone catch at his hand, and he was drawn out into the centre of the dancing crowd, among the ribbons and feathers and bright bobbing heads, so that his feet fell into step with the rest. Breathless, grinning, he glanced up. The black-gloved hand holding one of his own belonged to the figure of the cat, twirling in the skin-close black tights, with a long black tail swinging out behind, and whiskers bristling long and straight from the head mask fitting over the cheeks. He saw the eyes glint through the slits, and the teeth flash. For a moment, among the dancing figures all round, he saw close to him one in a great feathered Native American headdress, with a face startlingly like Mrs. Polk's. But as he opened his mouth to call, the black cat seized both his hands and wheeled him round and round in a dizzy spiral through the ranks of the crowd. People glanced down at him and smiled as he passed, and Barney, giddy with the music and speed and the twisting black limbs of the cat before his eyes, flung himself laughing round where it swung him. Who do we think the cat is? It's got to be Polly Withers, isn't it? Until he came up with a sudden halt against long white robes of a figure dressed as an Arab sheikh, moving with the rest so that the robes were swung wide and billowing by the breeze, and glancing up through a world swaying with his own giddiness. Barney had time only to glimpse a slim figure and a dark-skinned lean face, before the cat swung him by the hands straight into the outswung muffling folds of the man's white robes. The robe twisted round him as he staggered, still laughing in the sudden gloom, and then, so quickly that he had no time even to feel alarmed, the man's arm came round him like an iron hand and lifted him from the ground, and the other hand muffled his mouth in the folds of the cloth, and Barney felt himself being carried away. Before he could struggle, he was swung into a scuffling moment through the roaring music in the crowd. Pushing ineffectually against the man's chest, he felt him run a few steps and heard the noise of the voices in the band suddenly grow fainter. He kicked out blindly and felt his toes hit the man's shins, but he was only wearing sandals and could not do any great harm. The man gave a muffled curse, but did not pause, jolting him along with a few more steps until Barney felt himself swung higher into the air and dropped onto a padded seat that protested with the noise of springs. The robe fell loose from his mouth. He yelled and went on yelling until a hand came back and pressed hard against his face. A girl's voice said urgently, "Quickly, get him away!" A voice, almost as light as the girl's, but masculine, said curtly, "Get in, you'll have to drive." Barney suddenly lay quite still, all his senses alerted. There was something familiar about the second voice. He felt a coldness at the back of his neck. Then the pressure of his hand over his mouth relaxed a little through the cotton folds, and the voice said softly close to his ear, "Don't make a noise, Barnabas, and don't move, and nobody will be hurt." And suddenly Barney knew the black-masked figure of the cat and the dark man in shaked robes. He felt the seat shudder slightly as the noise of a powerful car's engine coughed and then rose into a throbbing howl. Then the note deepened and he felt a lurch and knew that he was being driven away. Rufus jumped nervously back from the shuffling, dancing feet that had enclosed Barney in the crowd. Tentatively, he put his nose forward to follow, once, twice, but always a heel came up in the way with an accidental kick, and he had to dodge away. From a safer distance he barked loudly, but the sound was lost at once in the booming music and the clamour of the crowd. Alarmed by the shattering noise and bustle suddenly filling his small world, he put his ears back flat against the sides of his head. His tail was down between his legs, and he showed the whites of his eyes. He retreated further from the noise, waiting hopefully on the corner of the street for Barney to reappear, but there was no sign of him. Rufus moved uneasily. Then, as the band drew directly opposite, blowing and banging only a few yards away, rocking every corner with the rise and fall of the music to a dog's ears, was a menacing, roaring noise. Rufus could suddenly stand it no longer. He gave up all hope of Barney, and turning his back on the clamour of the carnival, he padded away down the alley, with the tip of his tail sweeping the ground and his nose lowered, sniffing his way home. Simon and Jane rejoined one another at the corner of the harbour, quiet again now in the sunny afternoon. "Well, I've been back to where we said. He isn't there. I had a good look in the house. He hasn't been there either." "Do you think he could have gone off after Mrs. Polk?" I keep telling you it couldn't have been Mrs. Polk you saw. I don't see why not. If only you hadn't stopped me, I could have grabbed her. How could we meet Barney here if you... Simon began. Oh, all right, but we haven't met him. Well then, he can't have come down from the headland yet. Jane's expression changed. Oh dear, perhaps he's got into trouble up there. No, don't worry when we don't need to. More likely he's found Great Uncle Mary after all, and they're both up there still. Well, come on then, let's go and look. The car swayed and growled as if it were alive. Barney lay wrapped up like a parcel in the robe which Mr. Withers had slipped from his own shoulders as he dropped him in the car. He decided that it must be a sheet. The smell of it under his nose was like clean laundry on the beds at home. But he wasn't at home. He muttered peevishly under his breath and kicked at the side of the car. Now, said Mr. Withers. He took hold of Barney's legs and swung him none too gently round into a sitting position, at the same time pulling the sheet clear off his face. I think perhaps we might let you emerge now, Barnabas. Barney blinked, dazzled by the sudden sunlight. Before he could open his eyes properly to look at the road, the car swung squealing through a gap in a high wall and slowed down, its wheels crunching on gravel along a tree-lined drive. Nearly there, Mr. Withers said placidly. Barney twisted his head to glare up at him. He could still barely recognise Mr. Withers' face through the dark brown stain that had turned him into an Arab. The eyes and teeth glinted unnaturally white, and behind the make-up the man seemed withdrawn and pleased with himself, almost arrogant. Where are we? Where are you taking me? Don't you know? Ah, no. The dark head nodded wisely. Of course you would not. Well, you will know soon, Barnabas. What do you want? Barney demanded. Want? Nothing, my dear boy. We're just taking you for a little ride, to meet a friend of ours. I think you'll get on very well together. Barney saw through the trees that they were coming to a house. He looked down at the sheet still twined round him and wriggled to move his arms free. Mr. Withers turned quickly. Take this stupid thing off me, I feel silly. Just a little joke of ours, Mr. Withers said. Where's your sense of humour, Barnabas? I thought you were enjoying yourself. He leaned over and began pulling the sheet free as the car drew up outside the peeling front door of a big deserted-looking house. You'll have to hop out if you can. I can't loosen it properly in here. He spoke casually, easily, with no trace of menace in his voice, and as Barney glanced up at him suspiciously, the white teeth shone briefly again in a smile. The girl slipped out of the driving seat, moving like a snake in her black tights, and came round to open the door at Barney's side. She helped him out and spun him round to pull the sheet away. Barney staggered, his arms and legs so stiff with cramp that he could hardly move. Polly Withers, got it right, laughed. Her head was still a fantastic sight in the close-fitting black cat's mask, covering all her face but the eyes and mouth. I'm sorry, Barney, she said companionably. We did overdo it a bit, didn't we? You danced jolly well, I thought. I was almost sorry to stop. Still, never mind. Now we'll go and have some tea, if it isn't too early for you. I haven't had any lunch, Barney said irrelevantly, suddenly remembering. Well, in that case, we must certainly get you something to eat. Good gracious, no lunch? And it's all our fault, I expect. Norman, ring the bell. We must feed the poor boy. Mr. Withers, making a concerned clicking noise with his tongue, crossed from the car and pressed the bell next to the big door. He was all in white still, but in shirt sleeves and white flannels without his Arab robe. His bare arms were stained the same dark brown as his face. All right, I hear the baby, so I'd better go and we'll leave this till tomorrow. So take care, everybody, and have a great day. Bye-bye.